Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode of the Handyman Success Podcast. Super excited for another episode here. My name is Jason Call, owner of Handyman Marketing Pros, and I'm here with my co-host, Alan Lee, with the Handyman Journey and honestly handyman services in the Sacramento area. Today, we are joined by Sam out of British Columbia, Canada. And so super excited to have you on, Sam. Before we kind of get things going, just to recap with all our listeners here, the purpose of the Handyman Success Podcast is to really shine a spotlight on another home improvement business owner, their life and their business, to teach you practical business tips, and also to instill like hope and inspiration that you can create a better business for yourself. You can get on your own and get after it by starting your own business. It's 100% realistic and you can 100% do it. And so hopefully, this is just another interview that just shows you and gives you more perspective into that. So with that being said, Sam, if you don't mind kind of giving us a lay of the land, a little background about like where you are, who you are, where you are, and your business name, and kind of just a brief overview of your handyman business.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. So thank you for the introduction. My company is called Stelmeric Home Services. I operate out of Sydney, British Columbia, which is as pretty well as far west as you can get, and least snow you can possibly get in Canada. The population area that I work is 25,000 or so people. And I started work part-time in 2021. Ended up doing that for about a year until I got to the point where I just couldn't handle kind of having a full-time job in construction as well as the handyman thing. And then I made the full-time dive April 15th of 2022, almost going on a year now.
Awesome, man. So you had, so before you left your job, you had a full-time job within the construction industry?
I did. So the funny thing is the construction company, I worked for a development company in Victoria, and I originally started out as a laborer with them, and I worked with them for 6 years. And in the time frame of that, I went from a laborer to a site supervisor for the residential division into a site superintendent for the finishing phase of commercial builds, all in the meantime while I was also doing my carpentry apprenticeship.
Okay.
That's awesome. So you are, well, when this episode airs, you will be in this for a year. So that's fantastic. So what made you want to leave that construction job, that full-time construction job, to go pursue something on your own?
I was losing all my hair. It's I really love construction. Construction is one of my biggest passions in life. Mm-hmm. The one challenge, especially when you get into commercial development, is it just ends up being such it's very high stress. You have schedules that you have to hit, otherwise you have potentially very large kind of fines that your company's being hit with for missing the deadlines for clients to be moving in. You have really tight budgets that you're working with, and there's so many unknowns when you're working with 65 different units that are all kind of going up in a very short time frame. I was finding that another big change when I was working in the custom residential construction, you tend to be it's a pretty niche industry where you really get to know the people that you're working with, the subcontractors, and you view them more as people. Whereas when you get into the commercial side, it's more so, the project manager for the commercial company that's coming in for the plumbers or electrical, and then you relay all the information to them, and then they schedule their guys accordingly. There's not really, it's very unpersonal for everyone that's actually boots on the ground.
Okay, awesome. So can you walk me through like that first year going part-time? Like, do you mind sharing like how much money you made that first year going part-time and how much you're hoping to make this year going full-time?
Sure. So sorry, is that the first year that I was full-time and then going into this year?
Let's start with part-time. So 2021 to 2022, how much did you make that year in part-time basically?
So doing part-time, I was doing everything hourly. I didn't have any markup on my materials or anything. I knew very little about the business side of things. Mm-hmm. And I was charging out at $50 an hour. Okay. And I think in that 1 year, I made about $10,000.
Okay. Awesome. And how's this year looking like full-time?
Sure. So sorry, I'll just quickly just backtrack a very small amount. So for last year, when I went full time in April to December for last year of 2022, I did 76,000 in revenue.
Wow. Okay.
And this year for 2023, I'm currently on track to be hitting between about 290 and 330,000.
Wow. Fantastic. Fantastic. And what would you say has been the biggest thing that has led you to, like, how are you on track to make that? Like, what's the biggest shift that you've done to make that happen?
I'd say Google My Business and like Google reviews has been huge. I get responses all the time from prospective clients that one of the biggest reasons why they contacted me was the shining reviews that I have left from my clients.
Man.
I would say having a website as well. The two biggest compliments that I have is having a professional looking website that has everything very well laid out, and the review process. And I know Jason's not aware of this, but I've drawn a lot of my inspiration from my website from other ones where he's created. So
I appreciate that, man. Any way that somehow what we do helps people, regardless of anything, like that's what matters. So that makes obviously brings a smile to my face.
So are you by yourself, Sam, or do you have people working with you?
Sure. So right now I'm owner operator. I do have plans on scaling. In this summer, I'm planning on taking on my first hire, which is going to be a helper.
Okay.
And kind of continually growing until I can't anymore. So I don't really have any kind of limit that I see on the potential that I have to grow this business.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I say this to people all the time. I'm a huge advocate of like patience when it comes to scaling and building, like having your systems, your profitability in place. So when you bring someone on, like they know the job, they know the systems, they know the core values. You've got the profit where you're not necessarily going back to ramen noodles, at home. And I would say too, looking at like 290 to like low threes, that is like ultra like high for an owner operator. So I commend you for like your pricing and like, I mean, turning those estimates into book jobs. Cause I know, in most cases, depending on the market, like 150, maybe like a, nice city in like Southern California or, in bigger, like more populated areas, like 250, like an owner operator is a pretty high, like solo man revenue number. So you're definitely doing a great job on like your numbers if that's kind of in the horizons as a good goal to achieve this year. So awesome job with that. Let's see. I know we could easily jump into pricing, like, so quick, right? But I just want to make sure we got all. So one thing, Sam, that I found I'm so grateful to have you on this episode is like you started in April 2021. I believe that was our podcast already running, Alan, or it was just about to, but
yeah.
You're a very newer, jumped into the handyman journey, like Facebook group and like asking questions about starting the business. And now here you are, like really doing it. I guess, maybe the question would be like, what are some of the bigger pieces that you've picked up and learned to, now be really realistically looking your first full year, full time at doing those kind of numbers? Like, what are some of the bigger points that you've picked up and that you've implemented to be where you are right now?
Yeah, that's a good question. So a lot of the things that I've really implemented to help me grow, for one thing, when I first started out, everything was longhand. I just had spreadsheets. I didn't really have much software that I was using. That was brutally inefficient. It took so much time to try and quote work out. And it's just, you're spending for like a $300 job and you're spending an hour writing up an estimate for it. And it's not even a guarantee that you're getting it. It's just brutal. But when I changed over to QuickBooks, it was just like, it was a bit of a pain process to get familiar with the software. But once I've got set up into there for general handyman work, I can usually send an estimate out in about 5 to 15 minutes now. So that's awesome. Yeah, it's obviously the more estimates that you're able to have out, the more work you can potentially be having lined up. Another thing that has been really helpful is really focusing on my SEO on my website. The SEO is just being massive. Like right now, if you search up Handyman in Sydney, my company is number 2 on Google right now. Still have plans to hit number 1.
Yeah, it takes time, and I know you're in an awesome market, you know, right there. I mean, just the location. There's lots of ideal clients, so it's especially a good place to be located, since Google Maps so largely is, you know, you're going to be served within your local region of where you're actually located, right? So it's good to be surrounded by great clientele there.
Definitely. And yeah, another thing that's been very beneficial is sorry, my brain just went blank there.
It's all good, man.
Yeah, another thing that's been very beneficial in kind of really scaling up. There's a podcast that I listened to probably about 2 years ago. I can't remember the exact one that it was, but the person that was on and being interviewed, one thing that he had said that's always stuck with me is you always give $2 of service for every dollar paid. And I've found that it's been, especially the reviews and the relationships that I've developed with my clients, just in having that has been insurmountable. And just the level of appreciation that people have. And it just, there's something about, I feel like there's a big difference between just going in and doing a great job in a project, and then there's the next level where you go in, you do a great job, but you also have an awesome experience for that client. Like the things that people tend to remember aren't necessarily the renovation itself, but the experience that they went through. If it was really stressful, if it was pulling nails, and if the person kept having all of these hidden fees tacked on, they're going to be remembering that a lot longer than the actual renovation.
Yep, that's spot on. That's spot on. I love that. Give $2 worth of service for every dollar paid. I think that's huge, because I think it really shines a light on, like, kind of give more than you take in a sense, but also be something that's not out there right now. Like I hear a lot of guys, they complain about, oh, people don't want to pay me because, you know, other guys do it for super cheap or whatever, but be that guy that is that difference in the area, right? And you'll attract a lot more clients. Like people might say, oh, why am I giving $2 service for every dollar? Like I'm losing money, you know, or whatever. Like it's just imaginary at this point. But you know, the thought is you're creating lifetime customers. You're creating people that are actually part of your family, part of your brand, and they're people that are going to, you know, spread your word to other people. So I absolutely love that. I wrote that down. I hope the listeners write that down too. That's some gold nugget right there.
Yeah, and the thing is too, it's just perceived value. So there's a lot of extra little things that you can like do out of respect in that client experience. That's really cheap and easy, but to the clients, it really makes the difference. Yeah. You know, some of my favorite questions that was, is it okay if I park my vehicle there? You know, booties in the house. You know, there's so many different ways that you can kind of be smart and efficient about creating that, you know, how do I get from $1 to $1 to me giving $2 for the $1? So do you have any specific examples, Sam, that you wouldn't mind sharing as far as like what you do to kind of over deliver?
Sure. So one big thing that I personally, I feel like it's fairly novel in my market, at least, is when I'm going into a project, from the very first interaction with the client, I try to set a precedence of walking them through and helping them visualize from start to finish into what they're kind of looking at, and also really kind of breaking things down to a layman's term. And really, I feel like the way that I base my business is very much geared towards the customer service experience side of it, and ensuring the person actually understands everything that I'm telling them and everything that's going on around them, as opposed to just saying, well, this is what we're going to do. We're going to be in here this day to this day. It'll be wrapped up, and then the project will be done, and I'll send you the invoice out. It's very much, a lot of people, I think, take for granted the fact that while a lot of information, it comes second knowledge to experienced people that are in the industry, it's not necessarily common sense that one might think it is. So there's a lot of times where I talk with someone and their face is just blank because they have absolutely no idea what I just said. So I do find having the customer thoroughly experience or understanding everything that I'm going through in the project, and not only at the start, but going through every step of the way. I usually touch base with them at the end of every day. And then I also have weekly update reports that I send out to them at the end of the week, covering everything from the work completed, planned work for the next week, as well as any conversations that we've had on site. And that's actually one of my favorite pieces of documentation, because that document, it ensures that there's clarity, everyone's on the same page every step of the way, but it's also a great legal document in the event that someone in the future does say, well, no, that's not what I wanted, or that's not what I said, you need to take this entire thing out. Everything is laid out from every step, and it's very closely time stamped to the time of when the discussion happened.
Okay.
Wow. I love it.
So as far as, so it sounds like you do some bigger jobs too, as far as like remodeling. What is kind of like your focus services, bread and butter? Like, if you don't mind kind of giving us an overview of, kind of what your business does to generate sales.
Yeah, definitely. So when I first started out last year, I cast a really broad net. I was finding pretty quickly the bigger kind of things where I was making good money on were things like deck repairs and generally plumbing inside. And as I've kind of been able to scale up my portfolio and my repertoire for people to have a bit more confidence for me to be taking on bigger jobs, I've really been focusing on doing more so bathroom renovations. And I'm currently in the process of trying to kind of restructure very slightly to really heavily focus on interior renovations with a primary focus on bathroom renovations, while still using the handyman work as infill for when I have sub-trades coming in doing their work.
Sweet. I know a lot of solo owner operators that I know, like you can make really good money whenever you do offer like the larger renovations, but then you can kind of sneak in those like quick fix handyman jobs that are just like, right to the bottom line, in the afternoon or in the morning before going to your bigger job. So it sounds like you've got a pretty sweet like balance for yourself right now.
I don't know if balance is necessarily the right word. There's quite a few 60-hour weeks that I've been putting in, but I'm trying to find that balance.
Okay, what do you spend like when you work those 60-hour weeks? Like, obviously you're working, 35 whatever hours in the field, but how are you spending the other time in your business? Like, what sucks up most of the time? Is it people calling? Is it writing up estimates? What does that look like for you?
So yeah, I generally say that it's about 35 to 40 hours that I'm actually working in the field. And then aside from that, there's probably about 5 to 7 hours in email and phone call follow-up. And then 13 hours is kind of building quotes. The one downside to the bigger renovations is they do tend to be very time intensive for drawing quotes from all your sub trades, building an entire package. Like the renovation that I'm working on right now is a $63,000 condo renovation. That was quite a lot of back and forth as well with the pre-planning with the client and figuring out the kind of designs and finishes that they're looking for.
Okay, awesome. And
so free estimates. Oh, sorry, Alan.
No, you go ahead.
So yeah, when I first started out, I followed the advice of a lot of people in the Facebook group of charging consultation fees, which I did have a bit of success with that in the beginning with the handyman kind of work. At this point, for the handyman work, I am generally able to figure out how much time and materials it's going to cost by asking a few questions, usually over email, and then getting some pictures from the client. And that eliminates about 95% of the projects that I don't actually need to go out and look at. And that also saves me a lot of time, because then it's 5 to 10 minutes that I've spent for someone that's a tire kicker, as opposed to driving out there and doing all of the work. And so I pretty well don't do any consultation fees anymore as a result. Usually the only times that I'll actually be going out, the client already has a rough idea as what the price is, and it's more so because I need to actually look at and get proper dimensions. And then as for the renovation side, I did initially charge $60 consultation fee to go out. The issue with that was I was at about a 20% approval rate, charging just because people have these big projects and a lot of them are still in the planning phase. They're not ready to pull a trigger. And the first thing that they're kind of seeing is this price being billed out to them just to give them a price. Mm-hmm. So since I tried a few projects on just doing a free estimate, usually I'm out there for about an hour and a half, 2 hours talking with the client and going over ideas at the initial conversation. And so far that's went from a 20% to an 85% approval rate for my renovations.
Awesome. Yeah, there's certainly value in that personal experience and like selling yourself, through that. I mean, obviously a really great consultation experience that you give.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So how do you come up with pricing? Like, I want to jump back into that pricing. So I know, in 2021, when you were doing part-time, you chose $50 an hour. What made you choose that? And then how does that differ from how you price things now? And how do you come up with that?
So I kind of priced around $50 an hour because I was finding a lot of contractors that we were hiring on for new builds. That's kind of what they were billing out their guys at. I didn't realize how low they were budgeting themselves. So after that, and then that's kind of where I was going. And then I believe it was February of 2022 when I joined the Handyman group on Facebook, the mastermind group. And I started reading a lot more. At first, I was just shocked at some of the prices that people were charging out. And so I started doing more research, and I feel like a big part was just kind of exposure and seeing more regularity in how much people were actually billing out, and starting to realize that there actually is a thing that exists that are professional handyman. It's not just a bunch of people that are uninsured and a chuck in a truck that's going out and doing these jobs with a dirty wife beater on and
smelling like cigarette smoke, or for sure.
So and then when I first went out on April 15th, my first price, I think I was setting myself up when I was quoting, it was all fixed rate, but was about $75 an hour. And that was doing, I did a bit of a price breakdown. It wasn't overly detailed, it's just personal expenses as well as my overhead. Seeing as I was doing everything bootstrapping, I didn't really have much business overhead at the time. I didn't even have liability insurance or anything like that, which isn't something I'd necessarily recommend to people. And so as I've kind of grown from there, I'm about to do another price increase, but right now I'm at $85 an hour. And then for price markup, I'm at 50% gross profit.
So can you explain a little bit about that? You said you're at $85 an hour and 50% gross profit. Can you explain a little bit about that? And
sure.
What that's like?
So the $85 an hour is a kind of, it's a goal to be at about $100,000 a year minus the business overhead and expenses. So the one thing that was quite beneficial, I think it was actually you, Ellen, that added that the business cost spreadsheet on the Handyman Mastermind group. So I used that, and I did that as a breakdown and got quite a bit better of accurate pricing as to what expenses are. And that gave me a really good foundation to kind of work off of. And now as I continue to grow, I now have, I have liability insurance, I have life insurance, I have out of work injury, the insurance for that. And then I also have WCB that I recently signed on to, which mind boggling how much it adds up quickly.
Yes, it does. It does.
So, and then, so all of those have been a big factor into kind of price increases. And then it's also a factor of just me getting busier and busier, increasing my rates to get a bit better of a balance and still have that kind of target audience that I'm wanting to work with. Then on the material side, for the 50% gross profit, it's essentially taking the material cost as a straight cost and then doubling that. And that doubling cost, I find, is very beneficial. It covers me in the case of future jobs where I either underestimate the materials that I'm needing, And it also helps me to supply warranties for 2 years on the products that I'm supplying, as well as the labor that goes into going back there. And I feel like that's a really big thing that people tend to underestimate, because they're not really, you really have to factor in that thought, because inevitably there are things that you're going to be called back to no matter how good you are.
Yep.
It needs to be planned into account.
Yeah, that's one big thing we talked about on the last episode of the Handyman Success podcast with Mike Kleisch, is just the unexpectedness of things, right? Like this business has a lot of unexpected things, right? You open up a wall and you're like, whoa, I didn't expect to see that. Or you go, you get a part and you're like, oh crap, that's the wrong part. I got to run to Home Depot for the 7th time today. There's all these like unmentionables, things that you didn't know about, and those need to be factored into your price of both materials and labor. And I think that's probably, throughout, coaching people and giving advices, that's one thing that people oftentimes leave out of their equation, is just the unknowns, right? So I like your idea of, when you factor in labor charge, you need to factor in some unknown. When you do materials, you need to factor in some unknown. We actually mark up our materials by 60%. So a lot of people are like, well, how are you selling stuff at that price? But like, it's possible. You just need to find the right clientele. And it also, it allows you to stand behind that product. Like you said, it allows you to give a 2-year warranty. It allows you to, wear that nice uniform and show up in that nice truck, rather than showing up in a wife beater, in a beat up Prius, right? To go back to a joke before the podcast, but so it all plays into it. And really, I think at the end of the day, it comes down to pricing and factoring in those unknowns. So that's huge.
Yeah. Yeah. And then going back to the pricing, I also do for my handyman side of work, I do a 2-hour minimum call out, and that is for the first hour.
Mm-hmm.
And that also covers the admin time. So when I'm going out right now, it's $170 call out fee. So in the event that it's a 8-hour day that I'm doing, I still have that hour factored in. So that would be, sorry, I have to do the math real quick here.
Okay. You're basically building in an hour into every job that's like not technically labor hour, but just like a more administrative driving kind of buffer hour.
Exactly. Right? Because a lot of the times when I'm factoring the time for the job, it's factoring the actual process of picking up the materials, cutting out whatever I'm needing to cut out, and putting in the new material itself. It's not factoring in the admin time that goes into it. So I find just tacking on that hour, regardless of how much time it takes, sometimes it takes more, sometimes it takes less. It's just a good balance. So, and then I also I operate off of a similar system that Mike Radcliffe is the first one that I saw mentioned, which is the 2-4-8 principle.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so like a quarter day, half day, full day. That's how you estimate everything.
Exactly. It cuts down so much time on quoting as opposed to trying to find exact time frames. And as Alan had mentioned, there's so many variables to the type of industry that we're in that I find it's so much easier something's going to take 6 hours. I bill for the entire day. It's almost guaranteed something's going to come up. And instead of me having to talk prior with the client saying that I have to charge you extra, it's already built into the cost.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I always like the idea of that kind of pricing too, from a consumer mindset. I had before we moved, we had a handyman. That's how he charged as well. And it was just simple. Like as the consumer side, like it was really straightforward to me. It's certainly better than getting like an hourly price, which obviously we've shared many times on the podcast and in the group. Do not charge hourly. You got to have your back end hourly, but please just quote by the project. Do not say we charge $85 an hour and we think this will take us an hour and a half, because then you're on the clock, and that's why we start a business. It's not to be on the clock. Big part of it. So another question on pricing before we move on to another topic, Sam. Do you have any pricing goals? Like as far as do you have a goal to be at higher than $85 this year? Are you going to rock and roll with that this year, or any kind of future goals as far as pricing that you've laid out yet?
Yeah, so I started out this year with the price increase from 80 to 85, and then I'm about to jump up again to $90 an hour, and I might do another price increase later this year, depending on how things pan out. Right now, I'm currently booking out into September. So I'm,
Wow.
yeah, and then just another big thing is I'm planning on hiring someone in the summertime of this year as a helper, as a primary, and then the second hire that I'm planning on getting is a receptionist to try and ease the load of the amount of people that are calling and emailing me.
Yeah.
And so one of the factors with that, of course, is employees are incredibly expensive. So I'm wanting to try and get the software and the systems built in place in preparation for that next step. So it's very likely that I'm going to have another increase in kind of late summertime to balance that out as well to $9,500 an hour.
Okay.
That's awesome. One thing you got to think about when you're just one little thing about raising prices is every year we try and raise our prices by inflation. So say, you know, inflation average 8% last year, right? So if you multiply $85 by 0.08, that's $6.80, you know? So that's just kind of like one thing that we try and do that I wanted to offer to you.
At a minimum, yeah. That's awesome, man. Yeah, certainly. I mean, some like the first position that we always recommend people to kind of look at between the two is either a helper to help with more like labor, or just like really minor stuff that you can easily train and teach, or that office admin. A good options on that end too, as far as like if you needed, typically most like owner operators, they just need someone part-time to do a lot of the phones, estimates, like more administrative stuff. There are like technical subcontracting like companies, they specialize in fulfilling kind of like part-time assistants that can be a pretty, you know, nice financial, like, you know, it's a win-win. It's largely just a matter of having the systems and the training so they can rock and roll and work within your business. But, you know, just another option to look at as far as when you are looking for that next addition as the owner operator, which one makes sense. Those are the two most typical routes that we see.
Mm-hmm.
That's great ideas. It's something that I've put a bit of thought into as well. I'm guessing you guys have a lot more experiences in this than I do. Just trying to figure out that how to actually operate in a part-time basis for those kind of admin roles can be somewhat tricky, because obviously people tend to call and email and try to contact you at any kind of given hour as opposed to a set kind of time frame when the person's there.
Yeah.
So oh, sorry, Jason, you go
ahead, man.
Okay. Sorry, Zoom's a little tricky here. So the way that we operated is our first hire was a CSR. So someone in the office to answer the phones, answer the emails. That was one of the best days of my business, is when I handed over our business phone number, our business email over to her. I'm like, man, it's not my problem anymore. Like, you know, you take care of it. And she does a fantastic job with it. She's so good with clients. People often, you know, call me up and they rave about, you know, their experience with April and just the first point of contact. So she works part-time. So she currently works, I think it's 5 hours a day. We started out at 4 hours a day and then basically just kept following up and saying, hey, do you need more time? Do you need more time for like things that we added into her job description? And she pretty much just bases her schedule around when the majority of calls or emails or important things come in. So I think she starts at like 9 a.m. and then she takes maybe an hour or two off for lunch, and then she comes back, you know, kind of like when the peak call times are. But there are going to be those times where the phone's not going to be answered or the email is not going to be answered. But the cool thing about having a dedicated person is, you know, that those will be answered once that person gets back on the clock. Because for us, like, I remember I'd be out there, like, you know, hammering and my phone's going off and I'm like trying to answer and hold it while I'm hammering. And I'm like, they tell me what their name is, I'm like, send me a text message. Like, I can't take your information down. So and then I would have voicemails, I'd have emails, and at the end of the day, I'm butt exhausted. I ended up not returning those calls, right? So it's so great having someone dedicated to that specific job in your business, and really just give them the way that we teach and we coach a lot of our clients is to create a job description for that customer relations personnel that will basically have an outline of what they need to do, and then really let them create their schedule around that so that they can get it done with whatever they feel needs to be. Obviously manage them if they're not, if they're slacking off and things like that, you're going to want to manage it, make sure you set more of a time schedule for them. But most people, for one, love the freedom of doing that and creating their own schedule, but they also have the boundaries of the job description that you created for them. And the other cool thing about a CSR is ours lives an hour away, and she maybe comes down to our office maybe once or twice, maybe 3 times a year. But other than that, she works remotely. She works from home. Her husband's retired. Like, she works, 5 hours a day for us. And then she has the rest of the time to take care of her kids, take care of her husband, be with her husband. Like, it's a win-win for everyone. And it's really fantastic.
It's awesome. It sounds like a great balance.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. So kind of getting back to, so you're currently booking into September right now. Is that just for like larger inquiries, like renovations? Are you getting faster to like small home repair projects? Are those typically kind of just dropping off? Because I know people are just not going to wait, 6 months to get their ceiling fan replaced in most cases. So if you kind of could walk us through kind of how you are booking out your projects that come in right now.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm going through a bit of a growing pain right now in getting a bit better of a structured system of that. But currently how it goes is, in my schedule, the bigger projects tend to kind of take precedence in the initial building of the calendar. Okay. And once that's built and I can coordinate with the subtrades and when they're going to be coming in and doing their work and they need free reign, then I'll have 1 week here, 1 week there. And once I have those blocks open, I can let the clients know that I have this day or this day available for them to come. If that doesn't work for them, it's completely fine, but you could potentially be looking at about a month wait to. Mm-hmm. And then it's like, one of the challenges I'm running into right now is exactly as Alan was mentioning, is I've been somewhat drowning in the amount of phone calls that I've been getting. And it's, I've unfortunately, I try to follow up with everyone, but I've been probably having about an average 70% follow-up rate just because of the sheer number of interest that I've been getting. And I just don't have the bandwidth to be able to get back to everyone. Usually people don't appreciate being called at 9 p.m. as well. So.
Right. Yes.
And something we mentioned on the last podcast with Mike Kleisch. A lot of businesses that are looking at like, well, how can I grow next? The first question you can ask yourself is, well, how many phone calls am I answering? Because, right. In a lot of cases, especially for established businesses, the next phase of growth is not so much marketing as it is customer service and operations. Right. So, I kind of already briefly mentioned this, but there's a lot of phone answering services that can answer your phone 24 hours a day on behalf of your business. We actually use one in our company. They do a wonderful job. They're called Abby Connect. There's, Jane's Office, there's Answer Connect. There's all these services that you'll pay, maybe $300, or some of them are a lot cheaper, but, between $200 and $500 a month. But it guarantees that someone professional is answering your phone, very kindly. They walk through your scripts, identifying if it's a current client, if it's a new inquiry, they can either forward the call to you or take notes and email it to you. You can have it set up however you want, but in a lot of cases, rather than looking at new marketing, someone could spend $300-500 a month on making sure their phones are answered, providing a better client experience. And that's a great way to unlock more growth for your business too, is again, like it's said in the group a lot, answer your phone, show up on time. Very simple concept in business that in the handyman trade, when you do those right, you're just going to be blowing up. So anyway, just something to think about on that realm. It's a pretty easy, low-hanging fruit as far as the investment for being able to capture a lot more of those inquiries in a way that you can address without feeling like you got to work till 9 p.m. and call somebody when they're like, having their cup of tea or whatever they before going to bed.
Definitely, I appreciate that. And so this might be a question for later on, but just in terms of, I have thought of using someone like that. The challenge with that is, one is just the ability to ensure that they're adequately representing your business, and also having the level of accountability that you might have with an employee versus outsourcing. Yeah,
I personally don't like the answering call route, but I've never tried it, right? So I'm a little bit biased towards, an actual person. But so, I could be wrong. I probably am wrong. There's probably some places where an answering service works great. Jason's had some good experiences with it. Personally, I opted to get with an actual person, an actual employee. That way I could actually have them do other portions of my office work, right? So I don't only have them answer calls or answer emails, but I have them do follow-ups 2 weeks after the job is done. I have them send thank you cards out to the clients. I have them send birthday cards. So they're really the first and the last person that person or that the client talks to. So that's personally why I chose to go with an actual